I remember the night in startling clarity, not because of anything particularly grand or memorable about the party itself, but because it was the night I stopped being invisible to myself. It was a Friday evening in late October. The air had the kind of chill that whispered the coming of winter, and downtown was lit up in a golden haze of street lamps and high-rise reflections. Elena had been talking about the party all week. "It's not just any office event," she'd said. "It's at Darren's penthouse. He only invites a handful of people, top-level staff and their partners. It's a big deal." I was happy for her, genuinely. Elena had worked hard at her firm for 3 years, clawing her way up from an assistant to a senior marketing strategist. I had watched her give up weekends, endure belittling meetings, and pour herself into pitches that often got stolen or ignored. But this invite? It meant she'd arrived. She'd earned recognition. She deserved to be proud. And I was proud of her. That's why I wore my best suit, polished my shoes, even trimmed the beard I usually let grow rough. I stood in front of the mirror and told myself I'd be the supportive boyfriend tonight, no matter what. We arrived around 7:30 p.m. The elevator took us up to the top floor of a sleek glass tower. When the doors opened, the buzz of conversation and soft jazz spilled into the hallway. The penthouse was breathtaking. Open bar, a string quartet in the corner, glass walls overlooking the skyline, and clusters of well-dressed people sipping champagne as if they belonged in a movie. Elena looked stunning, a deep emerald dress that brought out the gold in her eyes, the kind of dress you remember long after the night ends. She held my hand as we walked in, but dropped at the moment we crossed the threshold. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was just nervous. "Let me introduce you to a few people," she said quickly, her voice almost distracted. But the introductions never came. Instead, she was swept up into a group near the bar, co-workers, executives, people with perfect hair and practiced smiles. I followed at first, waiting beside her, expecting the "this is my boyfriend" Adam moment, but it never came. Instead, I stood quietly as she laughed too loudly at a joke Darren made, touched his arm like it was second nature, and leaned in close when he whispered something in her ear. She glanced at me once, just once, but didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me at all. I tried to brush it off, got myself a drink, tried mingling, but I was out of place, an outsider in my own relationship. For over an hour, I stood on the sidelines. Every time I approached her group, Elena shifted away, as though my presence was an inconvenience. At one point, she even introduced another colleague's spouse, but skipped me entirely when I stepped closer. That was the moment I stopped making excuses. This wasn't nerves. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was intentional. She was performing for them, curating an image where I didn't exist. A polished, ambitious woman with no strings, especially not to someone like me. I watched as Darren handed her a drink with a knowing smile. She laughed again, threw her hair over her shoulder, and never once looked around to see where I'd gone. So I left. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tap her shoulder or ask for an explanation. I walked out of that glittering penthouse and into the cold night with nothing but my car keys and a heavy heart. As I drove home, my phone buzzed once. Her message, "Where did you go?" I didn't reply. Instead, I kept driving, past our apartment, past familiar streets, into the quiet parts of the city where the skyline was just a rumor and the air smelled like rain. I parked at a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and stared at the black window until the first signs of dawn began to stir. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the way I'd supported her during her exams, stayed up late helping her brainstorm campaigns, cooked dinner when she worked overtime, held her during panic attacks she never told anyone about. And now, when it finally mattered, when she had the chance to share her success, to say, "This is a man who stood by me," she erased me. So I made a decision. I went home, packed a bag, and left her a note on the kitchen table. "You wanted to act like I didn't exist. So I won't. Not anymore. I hope it was worth it." She called, texted, even showed up at my sister's house a few days later, crying, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just overwhelmed, trying to impress her boss, that she didn't mean to hurt me. But the thing about being invisible is, You start to see everything clearly. I saw who she became when I wasn't convenient. I saw the line between ambition and betrayal. And I saw myself, finally, as someone who deserved better. That night at her boss's party, she made her choice. And so did I. I walked out and I never looked back. The days that followed were strangely quiet. You'd think heartbreak would be loud, full of slammed doors, shouted accusations, late-night sobs echoing through hollow rooms. But it wasn't like that. Not this time. This time it was stillness, a silence that sat in my chest like a stone. And beneath it, peace. Not the comforting kind, but the type that grows out of clarity, like frost over a field after the fire's gone out. I stayed with my sister for a while, slept on her couch. She didn't ask many questions, just handed me a blanket the first night and said, "Took you long enough." That stung, not because she was wrong, but because I had ignored what everyone else seemed to see months ago. Elena had changed. She used to talk to me about everything, her ideas, her worries, her fears about not being enough in a company run by egos and suits. But as she rose through the ranks, that version of her faded. Her stories became edited, polished, filtered for corporate approval. She didn't want advice anymore, just applause. And I gave it, thinking that was love. But it's not love when you only matter in the shadows. 1 week passed. Then 2. She called every other day. Left long, apologetic voicemails. Said she missed me, that the party didn't mean anything, that she was just trying to prove herself, and didn't realize how she made me feel. But here's the thing about being forgotten on purpose. You don't just forgive it. You remember it. I started therapy. At first, just to talk, to untangle what parts of this were about her, and what parts were about me, about how I let myself become small so she could shine, about why I accepted silence in a place where love should have spoken loudest. The truth came in layers. Slow, painful, but real. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. One afternoon, almost a month after the party, she showed up at the bookstore where I worked part-time. It was a quiet shift, rainy, and the store smelled like coffee and paper. She walked in like she still had a place in my life. "Elena," I said without smiling. "Adam," she breathed. "You look good." She did too, but I didn't say it. She wore the same confidence, but this time it wasn't dazzling. It looked like armor. "I wanted to see you," she said, face to face. I nodded, waited. "I messed up. I know that. I didn't mean to make you feel small. Darren was watching. Everyone was. I didn't know how to be both things at once, your girlfriend, and that woman they take seriously." Her voice cracked a little at the end. I believed she meant it, but that didn't change anything. "You didn't have to be both," I said. "You just had to be honest." She looked down. I thought I could fix this. I shook my head gently. "You're not a bad person, Elena, but I think you became someone I can't follow. And I won't chase someone who lets go of my hand the moment people start looking." She was crying by then, quietly, just a tear or two, but it felt final. She nodded, stepped back. "I really did love you, Adam." "I know," I said. "I loved you too." And then I watched her walk away, again. But this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt full of something else. Something like freedom. Months passed. Seasons changed. I moved out of my sister's place. Got my own apartment downtown, close to work, and even closer to the little things that made me feel alive again. Mornings with sunlight to the window. Books I never had time to read. Conversations with people who saw me, not just a version of me that made them look good. Elena faded like a distant song. Occasionally, someone from her circle would mention a promotion or a post she made online. I'd smile, wish her well in silence, and keep walking. Because here's what I learned that night at the party. When someone pretends you don't exist, it's not just their mistake. It's your opportunity to walk away, to reclaim your worth, to never look back, and to finally start living like you do exist, loudly, fully, and unapologetically. It's been over a year now, and still, when I think back to that night, her laughter ringing out across a room where I didn't belong, the clink of champagne glasses, the sharp sting of realization. I don't feel bitterness anymore, just distance. Like looking at an old photograph of someone you used to know, but can no longer name the feeling they once gave you. In many ways, that night was the funeral of a version of me I outgrew. Back then, I thought love meant staying, enduring, being patient while someone found themselves, even if that meant they lost you along the way. But now I know that real love, healthy love, makes space for both people to be seen, not just in private, but out loud in public without shame or shrinkage. That night at the party, she edited me out of her life to blend into someone else's expectations. And in doing so, she handed me a gift I didn't understand until much later. The permission to stop waiting for her to choose me. I started writing again. It was something I used to love before life became a blur of responsibilities, deadlines, and trying to mold myself into someone else's blueprint of supportive. I wrote poems, short stories, bits of fiction that mirrored real life in ways I didn't always intend. I even got published in a few online journals. A local editor read one of my pieces, an essay about invisible love, and invited me to read it at a spoken word night downtown. I was nervous. My voice shook at first, but by the end, people clapped. Some even came up to me after, eyes wide with recognition. You put something I felt into words I couldn't say. One woman told me that moment meant more than all the invisible years combined. I also met someone, not right away, not in some dramatic, movie-perfect way. Her name's Harper. We met at a used book fair. She handed me a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran because I had a tattoo of one of his quotes on my wrist. She noticed me. From day one, she saw me, not as an accessory or a checkbox or a shadow behind her ambition. She asked real questions, listened, laughed without performance. And when we're at gatherings, she introduces me before I can even open my mouth, with a hand on my back and pride in her eyes. Not because I complete her story, but because I belong in it. We take it slow. There's a tenderness between us that doesn't rush. We've both been through versions of love that taught us what we don't want. So now, we protect what we're building carefully, like gardeners in early spring. Sometimes, when we're walking together, her hand in mine, our conversation flowing easy and unfiltered, I catch my reflection in a shop window. I don't look like the man I was at that party. I look like someone whole, someone who knows his worth, someone who learned the hard way that walking out isn't weakness, it's wisdom, the courage to honor yourself when someone else won't. Every so often, someone asks me if I'd ever talk to Elena again, maybe to clear the air, maybe to find closure. But the truth is, I already found it, in the silence that followed, in the peace that grew, in the life that began, not when she looked away from me, but when I finally looked toward myself, and I haven't looked back since. Now, when people talk about heartbreak, I don't flinch. I don't carry it like a wound anymore. It's a scar, sure, but one I wear with quiet pride, because it marked the beginning of something better. It taught me that love isn't proved by how long you stay when you're being erased. It's proved by the moment you finally choose yourself. Walking out of that party felt like defeat then, but now I know it was my beginning. Not the end of love, just the end of her chapter in my story, and the start of mine.